Today we are starting our new series for the fall months, or for fall next couple months here, just called Learning to Live. And what we're going to be doing in this series is we're just going to be looking through several different issues that seem to be the key factors that determine if someone thrives in this life or more just kind of survives through this life. From my observations over time, a large majority of people tend to just kind of be going through life and just attempting to survive from day to day. And those who have fallen into that trap of just surviving tend to be more fatigued, more pessimistic, more self-focused, more depressed, and more impatient in general in life. On the other hand, there are people who thrive in this life, and they tend to be more joyful, more focused, have more energy, have more purpose, they're more thankful, they're more generous, and in general, they're more content with where they are in life. They are people who have learned how to live rather than just surviving life day to day. Now, where most people make the mistake is this. They think the key factor and the key difference between thriving and surviving is environmental, that it's the things happening around you, it's the situations you've been born into, it's other people and how they're responding around you. But that is a misconception and a deception for the American culture, okay? There are places in the world that could be different, but if you live in America, usually the reasons of why you're thriving or why you are surviving has very little to do with the environment around you. The main factor that contributes to whether you thrive or survive is literally the choices you make on a daily basis. Most of the time, it's the choices that you have been making. In large part, it's the choices we make on a daily basis that are the main contributing factor to the life that we are living today. We see this from the very beginning of human history. In your Bible, all the way back to the book of Genesis, at the very beginning of creation. In Genesis chapter 3, we find two people. What are their names? Adam and Eve, okay? And they are living in paradise. They're living in perfection. They are living in God's continual presence, and they have an open relationship with Him. In verse 6 of chapter 3, it says this, "But the woman was convinced. She saw that the tree was beautiful, and its fruit looked delicious, and she wanted wisdom it would give her. So she took some of the fruit, and she ate it. Then she gave it to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it too." Now, real quick, who made the decision in this passage? Okay, Eve. And it's Adam, because Adam takes it from Eve and eats it, and they know exactly what they're doing. No one forced them to do it. God didn't force them to do it. Satan didn't even force them to do it. They made a choice at that moment to do this. And then in verse 23, we see this. "So the Lord God banished them from the Garden of Eden, and He sent Adam out to cultivate the ground from which he had been made." All right? So then we see there are immediate consequences. There's several others that He gives. But you see Adam and Eve's lives change because of the choices they made, not necessarily because of the environment they were in. They made a choice, and it led to bad consequences that had bad results in their life. Today we're going to start this series by talking about how we learn to identify our strengths and our weaknesses. This is very important to know about ourselves, to know what our capabilities are and what our liabilities are. In Romans chapter 12, verse 3, the Apostle Paul, he warns us of this, and this is his warning. He says, "Because of the privilege and authority God has given me, I give each of you this warning. Don't think you are better than you really are. Be honest in your own evaluation of yourselves, measuring yourselves with the faith God has given you." So Paul gives you a warning, and he says this: don't think too much of yourselves. Have an honest evaluation, an honest opinion of who you are. Now, the reason this is so important is because most people are not honest and upfront about who they really are. And if you are not, what happens is you generally make your life harder, and you make the lives of the people that interact with you, you make their lives harder and more difficult as well. You see, most people tend to think of themselves too highly or think too little of themselves. So we're usually on one extreme or the other. Either we think we're better than we are, or we're worse than we are. And we have to learn how to be honest and get an honest evaluation of who we really are. Because when we have an honest evaluation of ourselves, it allows us to thrive in this life more often because we're working within our strength areas, rather than just surviving life because we're working within our areas of weakness on a more regular basis. So, to help us understand how we determine our strengths and weaknesses, the best way to do it is to have an example to look at so you can go, okay, that's that helps me apply it to my life and figure out my strengths and weaknesses. So to have an example, and the only example I can come up with this week that's the easiest one to do is myself. So we're going to examine me today, what my strengths and weaknesses are. Now, I had to decide which ones I start with, and here was the dilemma. If I start with my strengths, you're all going to think I'm arrogant, and you're going to be like, he's an arrogant jerk. I don't want to listen to anything else he has to say. So that was a bad route. If I start with my weaknesses, I thought maybe you'll have pity on me, feel bad for me, and have some grace for me and be like, he's not such a bad guy. So we're going to start with my weaknesses this morning, and I'm going to walk you through them. And the reason I do this is I want you to, from my life being able to evaluate myself, understand how I came to know these are my weaknesses and how I work around them and how I compensate for some of them. And also with my strengths, how I work within them and how I try to stay within them as much as I possibly can, so I'm beneficial to the people around me and beneficial to my own life as well. So we're going to just walk through, and I understand this is kind of weird because the sermon here now we're going to dig into my psychological background, but maybe you'll find it humorous and all, but my hope is it helps you as we get later into this, looking at your own life, evaluating your strengths and weaknesses. So with my weaknesses, we're going to start there, and here's how I would give you a few keys to know what your weaknesses are, because yours will be different than mine. A couple of things to look at. Chuck, throw the next screen up. Usually tasks that drain you. So if you have to perform this thing or be involved in this thing, usually when you're done with it, you feel wiped out and you're exhausted. Usually that's a key indicator that this is a weakness you have. Or things that typically result in negative results for everyone. What I mean by that is this: when you participate in this, when you play a role in this thing, usually it leads to dysfunction, usually it leads to negative results both for you and for other people's around. If you see that happening regularly, usually that means you're working in an area of weakness. That's not something you should be working in a lot. If you continually see negative results in this area of your life when you are a part of it. All right? So here we go. And I didn't realize my wife was going to be in here today because usually she's not here so I can lie to all of you about who I am. So now I'm going to say these and she's going to be back there like, that's not. Oh, yeah, that is. Okay, so here we go. Here's the list. These are things I would say are my weaknesses. Not all of them, obviously. This is not an exhaustive list. This is some of them. One of them is delegation. All right, now here's the key thing. How many of you have been here for at least a decade with me? Okay, there's a decent chunk of you, so you know me fairly well, so you'll be able to know if these are true. One of them is delegation. I found this one out when I started my career, is I have a hard time delegating things out to other people, so I'd rather just go do them. Annie, is that true? Yes, okay. Annie will agree. She saw it this morning. So I have a hard time delegating things out, and I learned this in my career, and because of that, early on in my career, it was not best for me to lead teams or oversee things like that because I had a time delegating things out to people. One of the reasons I didn't want to be a senior minister is you have to learn delegation to some degree, and I was not good at it, and it was best to stay in youth ministry and kind of play that role where it wasn't as important and it didn't have quite as much impact on the church because I wasn't good at delegation. I am still not good at it. It's still something I struggle with. It's one that I have not been able to overcome. Another one I have is art. All of you are aware of this one. Can't draw a lick. Known this since childhood. Never went well for me. Never enjoyed it. I'm always astounded by people that can, but I have no talent there. So what I do with that weakness, I stay completely away from it, except for when I want you to mock me, and I use it for like a little thing in my sermons every once in a while, so we can all have a good laugh and go, ha ha ha. Okay, well, that's art. Here's the next one. I am consumed with doing. And what I mean by that is I'm not a workaholic. Autumn, you wouldn't call me a workaholic, would you? Okay. Better ways to say consume with doing. Most of the time I have a hard time just sitting down not doing anything. I want to go do something. Like I have to get stuff done. Not meaning go do entertaining things and I'll just do something. So like my son has hardly ever cut the yard because I like the physical labor of it. So I'd rather go out in 95-degree weather and cut the yard, weed whack, do all that stuff when my son could go do it, and that's why I gave birth to him so he could do those things. But I have to do something. So if I can sit on a chair and relax, or I can go out in the weather and do the lawn, I'll do the lawn. On my days off, and so I have to have things to go do or things to accomplish. I can't just sit because it drives me crazy. Like I have to go do something. The problem with that is I don't probably rest enough. And those of you that know, like even when I get injuries and stuff, I don't go to doctors and all. I just work through it. Like it'll heal up someday, and I'll just keep going. Like I don't stop. I don't slow down. It'll probably kill me at some day, but it's a weakness and it's not a good thing about me. because I do need to take some time to rest at times. Another one is this: I'm constantly competitive, and this is a weakness of mine. So in most relationships, I constantly see things as a challenge instead of just friendships. So everything's a competition to me. And when I say everything, I literally mean everything. Like, I can be walking down the hall with Steven, and like, I want to beat him to the end of the hall. He can get me into anything. He knows all you have to do is make something a challenge, and I'm like locked in. It doesn't matter how insignificant it is or how significant it is. I have to be competitive. Like, I see it as a challenge. I have to be competitive. I have to win. And if I don't win, it frustrates me. And then I want to get better at that. Even if it's stupid stuff, I want to get better at it so that I know later. The problem with that is I don't enjoy life necessarily as much as I should. I don't enjoy relationships as much as I should because everything's competitive, where I need to dial it back some and just learn to laugh. And I have gotten better at this in my life. I've just learned to laugh. Sunday basketball times, I've had to learn it a lot of just going, I'm trying to create a good atmosphere here where it's fun to play rather than be super competitive. So I've had to learn and get around that weakness I have. A few more I have. This one, procrastination. How many of you are in this club with me? Holy cow, that's like 50% of the population. I didn't know that. Okay. Procrastination. I found this one out when I got into into like a professional job life, as I am a procrastinator. And what that means, if you're not sure what that is, you always put things off, and you're going to get to them at some point. You put them off until you're in stressful situations, and you just got to get it done. Okay? In college, it was horrible because I would do no work. Christina, as we've been talking, I wouldn't do any of the work until like the 2 weeks before the finals. And then I'd be cramming and staying up like hours upon hours and cheating and doing different things like that just to get by and shortcutting things just to get it in because I had procrastinated. It's one of the things Autumn hated about me because Autumn is not one. So she just wants to get it done when it needs to get done, so it causes some conflict that way. But that negative thing in my life causes a lot of problems. One of the ways I've got around that, I learned early in my career, take Fridays off. It was terrible because I always worked on Saturday then because I procrastinated everything till Saturday, all right? So I never really got a day off and I started to burn out. So I started to learn I take Thursdays off now because I'm different than most of you. I work most weekends, so I take a day off during the week. So I take Thursdays off because then it still gives me Friday. So Thursday I know I procrastinate all these things till Thursday, and then I come in Friday and go, oh, now I finish them off. And it's really improved the quality of my life. I'm learning that technique with my procrastination. Another one, anti-authoritative. I hate authorities. This one goes back to probably being a kid. Okay, I just hate people in authority. I have to challenge them. I have to push all the boundaries. The best way I always describe it, I have to poke the bear. So if I see someone that's like a doctor and they let me just give you insight. I'm being honest with you, so please don't judge me too much. If someone comes to me and introduces themselves as Dr. such and such, I have to refer to them by their first name without using doctor just to tick them off, okay? Because my feel is you're trying to establish authority over me just by sharing your title because you think that means something to you, and I have to tell you it means nothing to me, so I'm just going to use your first name, and I won't even use your last name because I'm looking to insult you just to let you know that I have no value in the things that you value, okay? I'm admitting this stuff, and I'm just telling you, it's bad. That is not a good thing. It's something that's very detrimental in my life. It's something my wife has to deal with at times with me. It's not a good thing. It's one of the hardest things and weaknesses I have to deal with in my life is all authority. That's just how I view it, and I want to poke the bear. And learning to pull my hand back and go, don't do it, is hard, okay? The other few things I have, creativity, I'm terrible at. I'm not creative. I'm the least creative person you'll ever see. The one way I compensate for that, I surround myself with people that are, and I get input from them so I can hear, and then usually I go with it when I hear a good idea from people. So one of the reasons we do the Sunday Fitness Sundays, not my idea. I didn't know how to use one of the things I'll come up with here. And my strengths, I didn't know how to use my athletic gifts in ministry, and Stephen was the one I came up with an idea, why don't we do this? I was like, that's really good. Why don't we do that? So I'm just not creative, so I have to have other people around me that can. Communication, I'm not good. Okay? So if you're part of this church, I frustrate probably quite a few of you because I'm just not a good communicator. I hate communicating. I hate telephones. So I'm not a good communicator, so I have to work hard to try to compensate for that because in my job and the role I have, you have to do at least a minimal degree of communication. but it does hamper my ability to lead. It does hamper my ability to be everything Christ has called me to be because I'm not a good communicator. So that's another weakness. Last two we have, I am reluctant to ask for help. This is a terrible one. How many of you have noticed this over the years? I'm reluctant to ask anybody for help. Okay, I'm terrible at this one. Here's how my mind works, and this is a weakness. I know it's not good, and logically I know it, but emotionally I can't figure it out, is the best way I can say it. I hate asking people to do things that I think I can do because I don't want to burden you. I don't want you to do it. And I've started to learn over time, people just like helping sometimes, and that gives them value. They like doing it. But I struggle with having people help. So this morning, I'll give you an example. Annie was here, and we had some floors I had to be vacuumed over on the other side, and I set up tables. And he's like, I can do that for you. You go do what you need to do. And I was like, no, I've got like 7 minutes here that I can do this and get this done. And she's like, no, I can do it. And she literally had to force me to stop doing it, to vacuum and take care of it for me, because I just won't back off. What's that? What did she say? Yeah, you did threaten my life. So she did threaten me, and then finally I was like, okay, I'll let her do it. But I have a very hard time asking anyone to do anything because I feel like I'm putting a burden into your life, and that is a huge weakness of mine. The last one I had down was this. I'm not good with words, speaking, or reading, okay? I'm terrible with this, been since my childhood. The only way I can describe it for you, I can't really read in the sense that you think of reading. So what I've had to do in my life, thankfully my daughter has the same issue, but we found a way with this tutor in Owasso, it's magical. And she's unlocked her brain, and my daughter knows how to read. I don't know how to read in the sense you think of reading. The way I read is over my years of life, I've memorized what every word looks like and what it sounds like. So I just have pictures of every word, and that's how I read. So everything's just pictures is the best way I can describe it in my mind. I can't sound words out. I can't tell you how to put letters together and sounds together. I can't do any of that. So everything is over trial and error, learning. That's the picture of this word, and this is what the word is. So now I can read, and it sounds like I can read, but I don't read like most people read. So everything's pictures. So I've had to compensate for that throughout my entire life. So I said through high school, majority of my high school years was I can't read half the stuff I'm looking at because I've never seen that word before. So I was just guessing at most things. So you struggled at everything because you didn't know the words, you didn't have the vocabulary to do it. So that's a continual weakness. Now, with weaknesses, what I would tell you is this. Some weaknesses you need to stop and just avoid them. Don't be part of them. Some of them you need to find people that have strengths in your weaknesses and surround yourself with them and be willing to listen to them to help you around them and to give you insight to function within them. Some of those weaknesses you need to work on and try to turn them into strengths or things that you're decent at and you need to work on. But the reason I bring up the reading, speaking, and the words thing last is this. I want to make a point. There's one special category with weaknesses because you hear that and go, but Scott, a majority of your job is reading and speaking, okay? And words, that's a majority of your job, absolutely. There's one special place in there for weaknesses, and that is this. If God calls you to work within your weaknesses, sometimes God calls you to work in an area of your weakness that you have no skill level to do, and God calls you into it. And you have to have the faith and the trust in God. If He calls you to do it, you do it, okay? Paul had this issue. I want to read to you real quick. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 8 through 10. Paul talks about, doesn't give us details, but something is wrong with Paul. He calls it a thorn in the flesh, something that Paul can't conquer, a weakness that he has that he can't overcome. And he says this 3 different times. I begged the Lord to take it away. Each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weakness so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in insults, hardship, persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So sometimes, like Paul begged, God, get me out of this area. God, fix this thing. And God says no. Because in your weakness, that's where it works sometimes. And in your weakness is where you'll see how strong I am and how strong you are. Let me just tell you this. Sometimes God will call you to work in your weaknesses, and you cannot just use the excuse that it's my weakness, so I can't do that. If God calls you to it, you go and do it. So for instance, in my case, I did not preach a sermon until I got hired. I preached 2 sermons my entire life until I got hired here. Well, no, that's not true. Sorry. 2 times until towards the end of my last church. And then I spoke several times there on a little rotation before I came here. Did not like speaking, never wanted to be in this role. It's what God called me to. I can tell you this, every time I have to get up and speak, it wipes me out by the end of it because I am never confident. I never walk off the stage feeling like I gave a good sermon or did things well. Yesterday I had a wedding. During that wedding, I've done that same wedding service in general probably 25 times now. I have it mostly memorized. If you saw me before the wedding, I just read through my notes the whole time because I'm afraid I'm going to mess it all up. If you see me most Sunday mornings, where am I when you're worshiping the first 2 songs? Right back here, and what am I always doing? Yep, I'm on my tablet, going through it. I've read this thing 20 times. I know it, but I'm still back there because I have no confidence in it because this is not something I have a strength in. This is total weakness. So even after 13 years, this is still a weakness to me, so it wipes me out. But it's what God's called me to, and so you have to just take the step of faith and do it week after week after week, and you'll never get confident in it. But it's what God's called me to, and God calls you at times to work in your weakness. Here's why. The greatest times you see the hand of God in your life is when you're working in a weakness and you see God empower you to overcome it. And it's the times you see the hand of God most prevalent in your life is when he calls you into a weakness, you have the courage to take the step, and then he uses you in that weakness. And you go, that's God. And that's what Paul says here at the very end. He says, that's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in insults and all these things. He says, for when I am weak, then I am strong. Why? Because I see the hand of God. I know God is here. So every time that you have courage to work within your weaknesses, when God calls you to it, you will see the hand of God. It becomes very clear to you. Knowing your weaknesses gives you a very clear understanding of the things that hold you back, and it allows you to work around them so they don't continually cause you problems in your life. But if you're not honest about your weaknesses, you'll think some things that are strengths are actually weaknesses. You'll keep working in it, and you'll constantly get frustrated. All right? Let me move you on to the second side, strengths. Okay, these will go a little quicker. The strengths, and if you put that one up, here's what I tell you this. Strengths usually come easy to you, so they're things that just are easy for you to do, okay? Strengths are things that fulfill you. No matter how hard you have to work at it, you get done and you're like, that was great. Like, have you had that before? Like, certain things you do, hard work, most people are like, man, that was hard, and you're like, man, I love that. That means it's a strength that you have. And usually you have positive results for yourself and everyone else when you're working in these areas, that it's good, it's a positive result. People go, that was beneficial to everybody, all right? So let me give you a list of some of my strengths. One of them is constantly competitive. Now you go, wait a second, that was a weakness, okay? The reason I put this on here is this. Some things you have can both be a weakness and a strength. So the bad side of constant competitiveness is what I talked about, hurts in relationships and all. The good side of it is I constantly want to learn. So I'm always want to learn things because I want to know things because I don't want to be back in a situation where I don't know things or can't perform things. So it constantly forces me to learn and learn new things. The other strengths I have, I'm a servant. I just like doing things. I like doing things for people. If you ask me to do something, I'll go do it. I love doing physical labor and doing things for people and just doing behind-the-scenes stuff. I love that. One of the other things I'm consistent. Good or bad, I'm consistent. I'm always pretty much the same. What you see right now is what you're always going to see wherever you see me, whenever you see me. I'm pretty much the exact same person all the time. Unfortunately, some people have to live with me, and so they see that. But in general, for all of you, I am a very consistent person. I don't have ups and downs. I don't have changes. The other thing is I handle stressful situations well, I've learned. This one I've learned over time. When most people shut down in stressful situations and all, I usually stay very calm and I make rational decisions and usually good decisions. So what I've learned with that is in stressful situations, usually I do try to step up and lead more than I do regularly. Most of the time I like just playing in a team and just sitting back and letting other people lead and being a part of that. But in stressful situations or the one time I usually step up and try to lead because I know I do well in those situations and I stay calm in them and it doesn't affect me a whole lot. One of the other things I would say, I'm content, which means I don't have a whole lot of desires to go do new things, to get new things. I'm a fairly content person in general. What that allows me to do is it allows me to focus on other people more because I'm not focused about stuff I want or want to do. I'm more concerned about what others are. So that's a strength I have. One of the other ones, I'm athletic. That's been since childhood. Anything that comes to sports and stuff like that, I can do. What I've been able to do with that then is leverage that for the kingdom of God. and find ways to use that to build relationships with people I naturally wouldn't get the chance to build relationships with. So I've used it that way. Another strength of mine, I retain information and I can simplify it. I'm kind of like a sponge. It's where my son, where he gets his smartness from, is from me, not from his mother, just from me. But I'm kind of like a sponge. I can retain information. If I hear things, read things, it kind of just locks in. And the other ability I have with it is I can take things that are very complicated and I can simplify them very simply so I can communicate them back so they're not complicated but very simple for people. So I'm just able to find a simplistic thread through things and express those. A couple more I have is this. I have a solid understanding of my core values. The benefit of that is I don't make bad decisions often. It's very hard to tempt me to do something bad. Why? I have a very strong core convictions of who I am. If this is a weakness you have, you've got to find help for this one. You've got to find a supportive group around you, because if you don't have a clear understanding of your core convictions, you will make a lot of bad decisions that lead to a lot of heartache in your life, okay? So that's when you work on whether it's a strength or a weakness. I can help people work together. I've realized this over time. For a lot of years, because I was in chaos with just constant friction, I never knew this. But since things aren't in constant friction anymore, I have learned this one, that I'm really good with helping people who have potential conflict with each other, kind of being the mediator in between them, fixing things up and getting them to work together again, just putting things aside and move on together and have peace together and produce positive results together. So I found I'm good at that. The other one, and the last one I'll give you, is I'm good at ignoring people's issues. How many of you struggle overlooking people's issues in ways they've hurt you and wounded you? Like it sits with you. Okay, that's a majority of people feel that way. I have this, I don't know if it's a gift or what it is, I'm very good. People can do whatever they want to me, and I'll still treat you the same way, and it's like no big deal. And if you come back to me at some point and say you're sorry and all, I'm like, it never even happened to me. Like, I don't even care. Like, you can literally abuse me any way you want, and it doesn't really mean a whole lot to me, and I can just treat you the same way as I always would. So people who are literally looking to destroy my life, I can still go up, shake your hand, say hi to you, and treat you the same way as if you're my best friend, and it doesn't bother me. I'm able to ignore it and put it aside. In some way, it doesn't bother me. And I found that's a very good trait. It's a strength I have that not many people have, so I try to use that and work within that in my life. When you learn to work within your true strengths, and I use a specific word, true strengths, you can dramatically reduce the levels of stress, anxiety, frustration, and overwhelmingness that can ravage your life. And your efforts will result in a much more productive life with positive results than if you're working within your weaknesses all the time. So to kind of wrap things up today, I share with you my life for this reason. Hopefully it will help you better identify your strengths and weaknesses so you know better how to work with them or around them. So hopefully just hearing how I've discovered some of mine, I'll help you discover yours. You see, Jesus makes a very clear point on how important it is that we know what our weaknesses and what our strengths are. Here's what Jesus says in Matthew 7, verses 3 through 5. He says, "Why do you worry about the speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, 'Let me help you,' and get rid of that speck in your eye when you can't even get past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite! First get rid of the log in your own eye, then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye." The point Jesus is making is this: you can't help other people unless you have an honest opinion about what your strengths and weaknesses are. Because if you don't, you will go to someone who's struggling and you will think it's a strength when it's a weakness, and they will look at you as a hypocrite and you won't be able to help them at all. And in a lot of cases, you will make it worse for them and for yourself. So Jesus is making it very clear. You need to be able to identify what are your weaknesses and what are your strengths so that you can ultimately help people. This is what our ultimate goal is to help us benefit other people, to love people the way Christ did, and improve their lives and impact their lives for eternity. So on your programs today, if you have it with you, take them with you this week. You're not going to fill it out today. On the front of it, it just says this: your 5 strengths, your 5 weaknesses. What I want you to do this week is take some time and try to have an honest understanding of what those are in your life. What are 5 strengths I have? What are 5 weaknesses I have? And then keep that with you. Put it somewhere where you see it regularly, because it will help you start figuring out how you work around it, how you deal with it, and how you cope with that, all right? So it's a very beneficial thing when you understand those things. What happens is when you're in a state of survival, You stop looking at those things and you just survive. And what happens is your weaknesses tend to be the thing you work within instead of your strengths when you're surviving. And it's kind of like the snowball that just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and a circle that just keeps going in an endless cycle. And the only way to get out of it is to start to recognize what those things are so you can start avoiding the weaknesses and start living in the strengths more often. By honestly learning what your strengths and weaknesses are, you can become free to live and thrive rather than just survive this life. And truly, that's what everybody wants, is they want to be able to thrive in life. Nobody wants to just survive. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father,